welcome to another edition of Track for Track. And I am the royal priest called to be Nasty, aka Nasty on the Beats. And in this edition of Track for Track, we are going to be discussing my new album, The Inconspicuous and Intentional Acts of the Truth Man. And it's the latest project that I dropped. I believe the release date was August 6th, somewhere in there. Very, very proud of that project. It was one of those ones that I started working on immediately after the art album. Literally, right when I finished and putting out the art album, I headed back to Shreveport, which is where my family is at. And that's where I just kind of regroup, recalibrate, kind of rest, clear my mind, hang out with family and friends. And started really looking at doing a different type of beats, trying to get more into a basic, that's not the right word I want to use, but a more simplified beat structure and pattern, more of a, straight boom bap with, very simple sample over it. And I think I really was able to capture that. But it started there. What's interesting is, so I went to Shreveport and somehow I ended up down in Austin. That's where I shot a couple of music videos. I shot Track for Track for the David album down there. It was a couple of different things that I did media-wise while I was in Austin. I had a great time. But while I was down there, where I did a lot of the footage was at this particular park and basketball court. And the basketball court where I was shooting at, I was actually video shooting, but also shooting baskets. I was also listening to the beats that I had developed for this Truth Man project, and started writing to it, but it didn't quite start gelling right away. You know what I mean? As far as the writing, and I'm actually glad, because I think the project turned out a lot better because I pulled back. And so immediately after that, I think I ended up back in in Houston, and I started making beats for Killer. And he was trying to get me on the whole loops thing, and I made some loop beats for him, and then I made some loop beats for myself, and that's how the 45 project ended up coming about, and which got me into a much more complex form of lyricism. Like, I did a bunch of different things on the 45 album that I probably didn't do on any other project. A lot more layering of my vocals. Some of the rhyme patterns were definitely different. On one song, I actually, did 2 or 3 different voices. Just the styles of voices or whatever. So a lot came out of that, and then Killer put his project out, so we put our projects out right around the same time. I did 45, he came back. I put 45 out on June 25th, and the loop beats that I did for him, which actually inspired 45, he did a project called Never Afraid to Fail, which was about maybe half the size of my album, but both projects turned out really well. And then I got into that rhythm of being able to write to the what I call the Acts of the Truth Man album. If you hear me say Acts or Truth Man, it's the same album. The Inconspicuous, Intentional Acts of the Truth Man. The title came about, the Truth Man is a title I had used already, dating back to probably 2021 when God had given me that title, the Truth Man. And the Truth Man is really, as far as my definition of it, is a man in the earth who is an intense seeker, not just of truth, but of the spirit of truth. So I'm very in tune with the Holy Spirit, stir myself up in the gifts of the Spirit, the power of the Spirit, and so forth. And so in 2021 was a very trying year. I did a lot of heavy praying, and also a lot of crying during that time. And it's just a lot I was going through, you know what I mean? But it's probably the year I got the most solidified in the bones of my spirit, you know what I mean? Got really strengthened. And so that's where the Truth Man part came from. If you remember the art album had the Judge Hunter Green. That was also a title. Both of those were used in podcasts. So one of them was Fuck, F-U-C-K, Freedom Under Christ's Kingdom. Fuck with the Truth Man. That was one podcast. And then another one was called the Judge Hunter Green and Nasty Lavender. And so, and again, the podcast is still up. I hadn't been active with it in a while, but I knew I wanted to use, if not the titles of the particular podcast, the titles that I use in each one. So the quote unquote character or title or position that I use in each one. And there'll be others, but that's where the Truth Man part of it came. The Inconspicuous Intentional Acts, and I put an and symbol in between them because it wasn't originally there. It was the Inconspicuous Intentional Acts, and I put the Inconspicuous and Intentional Acts. Was something that came about after the art album. I knew I was being very deliberate about the things that I was saying, the things that I know God is having me to do and going to have me to do. And I kind of played with whether or not it would be blatant and in people's faces or more concealed. And so just for the title, I just said the inconspicuous, you know what I mean? More concealed, hidden. The inconspicuous and intentional, so though hidden, very intentional acts of the Truth Man, which also plays off the book of Acts in the Bible, in which the apostles were able to do mighty things through the power of the Holy Spirit. So i.e. the acts of the Holy Spirit. So that's how the title came about. And then, from there, I just started really gunning in how I wanted to write. I would, late at night, I would go to a sports bar and get me a couple of margaritas and maybe some tortilla chips and salsa and just get to writing, you know what I mean? And the concepts would kind of come and then I would kind of develop from there. And very pleased with this project. I got to be honest with you. This is one of those projects that, like I said, I'm glad, even though I didn't necessarily see it happen that way, I wasn't intending to put it aside, but 45 really had a time limit on it if I was going to put it out on my birthday. So that, when you're trying to hit a deadline, you try to prioritize that. Plus, I had some other projects, Marvelous Midnight Made on a Monday, The Avaricious Reclamation of a Craftily Stolen Green, A Jazzy and Wet Dream, ones that are kind of right in front of me that I was hoping to, in fact, the Monday project was one I was really aiming at, trying to get that one done. And again, it just didn't quite happen that way, you know what I mean? Some tracks got written and then you just kind of slow down and wait for other concepts to develop, figure out where you want to go with the project. So, but the Axe album was born, you know what I mean? And I immediately got to it. I had all of my beats. My beats, for the most part, if I'm correct, all the beats for Intentional Acts was done before I even started the beats for 45. I don't know if there was any in there that were added, you know what I mean, production-wise, like me actually going in and said I'm gonna add some beats to them. Now, some of them may have gotten, I know for sure one of them got pulled from a different series of beats that I didn't intend, and I'll let you know as we get into this which one that was that got added, because I knew I wanted each project to be at least for this one to be at least 7 tracks. I didn't want to go too much beyond that, and if I'm correct, I did just that. It's 9 total, but one is just the opening, me talking, and then one of them is just like an instrumental interlude in there. So I stuck to my guns on that. Alrighty, the opening is the first track on the album, and if I'm correct, that was probably done way after the recording process got handled. Again, I recorded this at Lyric Hill's upstairs guest room studio, and house and dog sitting for them at the time. And so, I immediately got to the recording process. I actually struggled with the recording initially. The first night didn't go as planned. It just, how I was in my voice inflections and so forth wasn't gelling. But the opening, even though it's the first track on the album and it's me talking, it was probably something that I did, last, just to add something before getting into the first actual musical track. And it talks about at the beginning, God sent forth light, and it talks about truth and light, and basically using me as in not creating, but in manifesting truth and light, also sending forth a vessel to go and chase it or him down, i.e. the spirit of truth is the manifestation of light, and that vessel is me, the truth man, you know what I mean? So not just the spirit of truth goes forth, but a vessel or the man of truth to go chase it down. You know, it's interesting, probably the best example I can give is when you look at dog racing. I've seen it on TV and in movies and cartoons. And if I'm correct, they'll send a bunny or something around. I don't know how true that is, but that's sent, and then the dogs basically have an incentive, if you will, or motivation to run around the track chasing or what have you. And so that's pretty much where I step in. It's as I've developed in the Word of God, I recognize that the Lord Yeshua being the Word manifested in flesh, the power of the Holy Spirit that testifies of Him and also through Him, what is the reflection? It's the truth man, you know what I mean? The manifestation of the Word, you know what I mean? What do you get? I hate to call it Frankenstein, but I mean, you know, you build something. When you build, you have an intent. The mastermind behind the engineering and the structure of something, and then the product, and I am that product. You know what I mean? I take it very personally. That doesn't discount anyone else. I can't own it for anyone else. You know what I mean? So yeah, and he talks about the truth man. The testing ground. The interesting thing about the testing ground, it's one of the tracks that got written early. It got written early. Or part, you know, what you hear wasn't original. So it got written more than once. I had started out, you know, a certain way with the track or whatever, but again, that was before I got into 45. So, you know, I don't know how other artists operate, but my lyricism develops with each project. There's different things that I do, how I think, you know what I mean? And so I wrote probably maybe 12 bars. I don't think it was a full verse. I don't think I ever got that far of having a full 16. But 12 bars. And then I just never went back to it until got ready to really put the album together, and it just didn't quite where it was at. It just didn't quite fit with some of the other tracks that had gotten written, you know, were at. So I knew I wanted to come more aggressively, much more bold, a lot deeper, you know, somewhat punchliney in there and so forth. And I think this really captures it. A great way to open up the ding, 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 ding. It was always intended to open the album, by the way. Ding, 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 ding. It almost has like a boxing bell type sound to it. Nice kick and snare, very simple. You know what I mean? It just allows for the MC to get in there and just bar up. You know what I mean? It's interesting because I had in mind, just being honest, I hate to say channeling, but I had in mind Sean Price. The legendary, God rest his soul, Sean Price when I was writing. You know what I mean? I was listening to not a lot, but more than I ever have as you know, him being a solo artist. Started adding some of his music to my playlist and really like Sean P. I've always been a Helter Skelter fan, but him as a solo artist, I started listening to other albums that he had done, some stuff he did with Ninth Wonder and other projects thereafter, and started to really get a feel for what he was as an individual solo artist, and kind of use that as an inspiration. If you hear the testing ground, I'm not gonna say I sound like him, but I can hear, you know, how he structures his bars a lot of times. So that was my inspiration for that. And what it really captures is really, like I said, it's really aggressive. Gets into the sexual aspect. Gets very bold up front. Still, Jill, Jack, and the Beanstalk. You know, say it's just a table read. You know what I mean? Again, getting into the whole axe theme. So almost like pulling back the corner. Still, Jill, Jack, and the Beanstalk. You know what's interesting about that? that's one of the first plays that I saw as a kid. And in kindergarten, we went to go see a play of Jack and the Beanstalk when I was 5 years old, and I remember it because it was a white girl I used to like. Her name was Jana. And matter of fact, she's mentioned in my 45 album, The Dear Me at 23. I like this girl named Jana at my school, by the way. So anyway, we had to pick, who are but you pair up buddy system and so forth, and I picked her. You know what I mean? I remember I kind of got teased for it. You know what I mean? A little shame. But yeah, we went to go see Jack and the Beanstalk. So anyway, that kind of plays into, but it starts getting into that whole aggressive. I'm coming bold in a sexual posture, and I'm not really caring about what anybody is saying. I'm very bold and blatant about it. What you gonna do about it? You know what I mean? And it has, it lets you know. It talks about, the sex appeal that Lex Steele. Lex Steele is a porn star. You know what I mean? The sex appeal that Lex Steele wants to mimic. I've got a line in there where I talk about Uncle Luke will look like a pastor. So what it's basically saying is, just in case you had any question about what my agenda is, my posture and aggression and direction is, this is pretty much letting you know. You know what I mean? So that there's no question about it. You know what I mean? And then as it continues on through the track, it's one long verse, and as it continues on through the track, then you get to the end, and it announces Truth Man. You know what I mean? Boom. This is the truth and posture that God has given me to stand in, and not to let anybody bowl me over. There's parts in there where I talk about one's an unbeliever, one's a deceiver, one's a cynic. You know what I mean? Just different frames of mind of people that come at me, who try to dictate or tell me what I can and can't do as a Christian, when my whole posture is directed at focusing on the Spirit of God. That's what makes me the truth man. It doesn't mean that I have all truth. I have all intent to move, walk, operate, and be led by the Spirit of truth, that's why I'm called the truth man. And so, the holding door. I knew when I made this beat and kept playing it over and over again, I got to do something with this. You know what I mean? There was a lot of beats made for this album. You know what I mean? That were in a certain series, a certain time frame, like late March to right at late April. So for about 30 days, I was really in this specific posture of making a certain style of beats. A little bit more boom bapish, a little bit more simplistic, or what have you. But as I continue to play this one, I was like, okay, I gotta do something with it. I don't know how I got into the rhythm of the verse. I think I may have started with the chorus. I don't know if I just went straight into the verses. But I open up again, and by the way, y'all know, as I tell you, a lot of the mysteries of the kingdom of God that I do, with my other phone, I'll be rehearsing. God will pour into me. It's different things that I'm working out. They get added into the records. You know what I mean? Pretty quickly a lot of times. You know what I mean? I'll start going ahead and moving them into the records. So that's why I started out. I fixed a plate of apple slices from the tree of G&E, notes in a certain key of chivalry. Spitting seeds of if a bitch belittle me, then it'll be the first and the last time of a fast rhyme and riddle me. The fix a plate of apple slices was born out of the mystery. You feel me now? If Eve ate the fruit, nothing happened to her until she gave it to her husband. He did eat and they fell. What are the consequences if he eats from the tree thereafter? Just a thought. You know what I mean? What are the consequences? He's already fallen. I'm not making that a good thing, but you're under it now. You get whatever are the consequences exacerbated? Because if not, what's to stop him from actually eating of that tree on a continuous basis? You know what I mean? And so that's what that was born out. So I use that as a way to say, taken of what was forbidden fruit that has brought Adam underneath sin, the fallen nature and so forth. What's to stop me from eating now? So now that's why I said fix a plate of apple slices. It's like fixing it as a snack. Tree of G and E, good and evil. I fixed a plate of apple slices from the tree of G and E. Notes in a certain key of chivalry. Spitting seeds of if a bitch belittle me, it'll be the first and the last time I will fast rhyme and riddle me. Basically saying I'm not going for that. You know what I mean? Coming with a wisdom and posture regarding the women that condescending a king will get you, get you ousted. And that's why the next line says, a Dr. Seuss mock, Ahasuerus knock. Ahasuerus was the king who Esther eventually got married to and so forth and helped save the nation of Israel. But he was king at the time, and his wife Vashti, the queen, he had, there was like a party that they had going on, and he called for the queen, and Queen Vashti wouldn't come. You know what I mean? And it caused a big stink in the kingdom, because if the queen won't submit to her husband, and the other guys were, all the guys that worked for the king was like, king, you got to do something, because if the queen won't respect you, our wives is following suit. You get what I'm saying? So that's what that is. And so it starts out with that, and it kind of goes along, talks about my agenda of how I'm going to handle the women. And then when you get to the chorus is talking about my situation with the initial young lady, namely the pretty lady with the cute nose, Adrian. The vision was so mild. It was basically saying I had a monogamous mind, and it says it in the verse. Through the honor she slew, she blew and blew monogamy. And it talks about how Ashley came in and took off and basically threw a blanket and spread it out for me to have we'll just use the word opportunities for now. But in the mildness was the focus on the one woman and trying to bring that relationship back together. But in that resistance, the constant resistance, and we're not just talking about a self-inflicted or selfish agenda. God opened me up to 2 women and then opened it up even wider. The 2 was just the idea of more than one. And then it went, okay, Ash gonna get me whatever one. You know what I mean? It's finna be multiple now. So the vision was so mild till it went dead. The permission to go wild was then infed. Even strolling the slow mile to get in bed, I'll be holding the door while the fish sent to enter come in. Examining the lesson, I can see the destiny was even sketched at inception. This was God's plan the whole time. Was even sketched at inception. So tread in the slow mile, no matter how long it takes. Tread in the slow mile to get in bed. I'll be holding the door while the fish sent to enter come in. Very deliberate. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say it's my favorite song on the album, only because the next one is. The next one is, but they're running neck and neck, and I'm glad I put them, one behind the other. Next verse. Some on one rib. Some are on one rib. Some are concerned about monogamy. Some on one rib. My dibs are of a rib cage. Slab sauced at this stage. Raw tossed and kissed. With a hog moss of lip gloss rambling. If I'm the one you gambling against, then you just lost to the pit boss. You know what I mean? Which is interesting, because you think a pit boss is my dad used to work in casinos, and I did too. A pit boss is somebody who kind of oversees multiple dealers. You know what I mean? So pit boss. So I use the gambling pit and then also pit for like a grill. You see what I'm saying? If I'm the one you gambling against, then you just lost to the pit boss. You know what I mean? And just kind of goes on from there. But yeah, that's what the track was about. It's really throwing in mysteries of the kingdom, mysteries of the Word of God, along with my personal situation, blended together to tell a story of how I not just arrive at, but what my posture and thought process is now that I'm in a posture of understanding, relinquishing a monogamous mindset. By the way, I don't advise that for everybody, and I've said that. I do this straight with the Spirit of God. This is not my dick leading. This is the Spirit of the Lord leading. Most men will never do that. So I can't vouch for how they operate. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying I can't vouch for them or make justification for anything that they do. That has to be very personal between them and the Lord. And if it works, great. But mine is very intentional regarding the Spirit of God, because it's not just about what he's doing in and through me and bringing to me. There's a series of judgments that are involved as assigned to other people, and realigning how he wants things to go and wanted things to go from the beginning of time. You know what I mean? Holding door. So as the track fades out from the music, I wanted to draw a bridge between the two tracks, because the next track comes in, boom, boom, doom, 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 and it's really probably the flagship for the rest of the project, like the target of the project. But that being said, I knew I wanted to go and take an interlude into the next track. And so what you hear at the end of Holding Door is a conversation between an older guy, maybe in his 20s or 30s, trying to mentor, if you will, someone of like a little brother. And he's trying to instruct him. You can make it minister and student, you can make it teacher and student, you make it big brother, little brother, father and son, even uncle and whatever. But it was to try to demonstrate an older black male trying to talk to a younger black male and trying to teach him wisdom without necessarily telling him the answer. And so he's challenging him, and the young man is feeling concerned, like, you're trying to trick me, because he's expecting to have an answer right away. But he's trying to explain to him, this is how you develop into a king. There's a scripture in the Bible that says it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the honor of kings to search it out. You know what I mean? And so what he's saying to him is, when you figure this out, you'll know where you're at king-wise, because that will illuminate it. The process and the revelation go together. You get what I'm saying? So just telling him the answer wouldn't have done him any good. You see what I'm saying? The crown is almost, if you will, virtually put on by being willing to go through the process of searching out. And there is an answer to the question. You know what I mean? There is an answer to the question. There definitely is an answer to the question. But I wanted to use that as a way to, not just for the mystery of what the answer to the question is, blah, 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 but to show that that's how black men should be with other younger black men, is to teach wisdom. You know what I mean? Seek to raise kings, you know, and have a king's mindset. You know what I mean? So. The assembly. Lust policy, admonishing, a lobby, and watching, full throttle, to watch, policy, squash, transitioning from the ending skit from the Holding Door. That's why I said I wanted something to go into the assembly, because it comes in tough. Probably one of the hardest beats on the album. You know what I mean? I had fun recording that one too. The nature of that song, now this is different. If you're familiar with me, you know that I do furniture assembly and installation for a living. So you buy something from IKEA, you buy something from Walmart, you buy something from, another department store, Target, you order something off Amazon, Wayfair, swing set, blah, blah, blah. I put all that together. You know, I'm the guy you call to come put furniture together. I've done it on the residential and the commercial side. I've done everything from large university installation projects. That didn't require a whole lot of assembly though, but a lot of moving, a lot of school furniture installations, and on down to just assembling a small little cabinet for somebody's daughter's bedroom. You know, I've done all of that, and still do. So I named this track The Assembly because I'm drawing a correlation, if you will, a blend of assembling a government. So you hear a lot of governmental terms, phrases in there, operations, etc. But then the chorus, you start hearing tools, hammering away, hard nailing particulars, red for assembling a bed and a cabinet. So a bed, but also a cabinet, but also a government cabinet. You know what I mean? So that's what I was drawing on. Hammering away, hard nailing particulars, red for assembling a bed and a cabinet. And then you hear me say, I do this for a living, so I have all the power tools for having it. So that's, you know, it's just the way that I put that together. And so it opens up talking about the lust policy. Just flat out, lust policy. Admonishing a lobby and watch at full throttle to wash and polish and squash models, the rule flock at pool parties to pop bottles. We talk about having a good time, followed by a game of hopscotch, crop tops, the top-notch hot delegation with a stark naked, wide hips and tips they shake into a proposition, tune a government by rub at every hand, and it's unanimous, eventually convincing them in opposition for the top position any could reach. Each delegate a feature perfect body and hair, whether afro, natural, braided or bleach. They'll be brought into my caucus of a naughty affair. Coalitions of bold missions to hold until the only resolve is that they calling and involving me to educate. The general pop, nasty women with the operation, push between the middle of legs for me to legislate. Executive branch, seated from sex as well needed as pizza dough. So that it reflects the checks and balances heated though. The other guarded party is starving for warding off the arm of the God they disregarded, partly because they're always granting me immunity answered when the opportunity for tossed salad knocks. Catch me with almost compels my ticket at the ballot box. I forgot that last line. I don't know why I recited that whole verse, but it gives you an idea where I'm going with it. You know what I mean? I'm talking about, I hate to call it an orgy, but it's a party going on of just intense fun, sexuality, drinking, blah, blah, blah. But this is my government structure. And so I use that with the furniture assembly and installation, how I'm putting stuff together. You know, the hammering away, hard nail in particular. I just thought it was a great way to use the term assembly, assembling a government, and assembling furniture, assembling a party, if you will, blend all that together. Probably the beat that inspired the album the most. You know what I mean? So when I made that beat, it's probably the one that I played the most from the project. Actually, it would be second. The last track on the album is probably the one I played the most, but between the two of them. And so I knew that this was going to be a part of the project. You know, it's like that. I don't know how other artists do, but I've heard people talk about how many songs they recorded, how they pick which is going to be the single, which ones are going to go on the album, putting the album together, and so forth. And I have my own process of doing that, but a lot of times there'll be a single one or two beats that is the nucleus. Like this is the base of the project from a production standpoint. That's the beauty of being a producer MC. You know what I mean? So as a producer, I'm saying this has to be in there. And each album has their own staple or foundational beats that I'm building the sound of the rest of the album around. You know what I mean? And that was mainly that beat and the last track on the album. And so, you know, when it came to, now again, beat was made back in late March, early April. And I probably didn't get writing it until sometime maybe in July. You know what I mean? I like how I spit this. You know what I mean? I really like how I spit this particular song. I really went in. There's a couple of spots in that first verse that demanded a punch in because it's a lot. Right when I get to the part where I say executive branch, that's you see what I'm saying? There needed to be a breath before that, but lyrically, I had to keep that going. So easily had to punch that part in. You know what I mean? Executive branch, seated from sex, well needed as pizza dough. So anyway, the assembly. That's how that track came together. And like I said, it's probably the one song on the album, one out of maybe 2 or 3, but it was the one that I knew for sure was going to be on the album. All right, the dual invest. You heard me mention in the earlier part of this edition, I was talking about how there was a beat that got added from a different series that wasn't necessarily in the main set of beats that was supposed to be for this album, and that was it. So let me go ahead and say this. Originally, the Intentional Acts of the Truth Man was going to be a larger project. And then I was like, nah, let's start, we've done, albums that had 10 plus tracks on them. You know what I mean? David album had 15. Song-wise, it was probably like 10 or 11. The Art album had 13. Interlude or 2 in there, so we're still at about 10 or 11 actual songs. At least 9 to 10 actual songs. And then when you get over to 45, again, like I'm a solid 9 to 11 actual songs on the album. I'll throw an interlude in there, blah blah blah. But it's like, okay, let's start cutting them down a little bit. That way we can kind of get projects out a little bit faster, and then you know what I mean. Then if we got to come back to it. So because I did that, this actually is getting broken up into 2 or 3 different. So there will for sure, God willing, will be an Acts 2. In fact, I was listening to and writing to a couple of the songs today, this early evening. So when it came time to split up what would go where, I was very deliberate about it. I moved stuff around quite a few times, trying to make sure I get the right fit, especially for Acts 1. You know what I mean? I wanted to make sure that, and I got some heaters on Acts 2 that could have easily gone on Acts 1, but I wanted the cohesion to be there. I want to make sure I feel each track as it flows through the project or whatever. And this beat wasn't one of them. You know what I mean? And so somewhere around maybe the week before, a week or 2 before I actually went into recording, if that far back, I was like, I got to add one more in there. I knew I had to have 7. That was my goal. I had to have 7, and I didn't want to pull from the ones I had moved to like the 2nd and 3rd editions or what have you. You know what I mean? I had reserves and so forth, and nothing said, just jumped out at me. But when I heard this one, I was grooving to it. I was like, this could work. This could work. And so I started, vibing to it, meditating on it, figuring out where I want to go with it. And where I went with it it's called the dual invest because the concept is I'm the investor and the investment. So what I'm doing is if you will, investing in myself. You know what I mean? But then you got the whole sexual element in it. But you hear the different different things I talk about in there as far as investing. I talk about, bigger than crypto. I talk about how there's women, you say women, but people in general that are laughing at me, but particularly women. I know there's some mocking going on, but eventually they're going to try to come back in and act like the shit never happened. You know what I mean? I say, how do you see all this prophetically? That's what I do. I pray a lot in the spirit. And so that's what that was written around. It's like also bringing in a little bit The Avaricious album is really going to do more of it, but it's talking about bringing in a new form of currency. You know what I mean? So I kind of hint on that a little bit. But I really want to talk about, you know, investing in myself. What I am doing is an investment in myself. So the investor and the investment. And I'll be getting the benefit of everything that I'm working hard in my spiritual life in God to accomplish. You know what I mean? There's going to be a time, a day, if you will, of payout. You know what I mean? So that's what that track is all about. You know what I mean? And then when you get to the chorus, it ends with "to the condescension of Kama Sutra." It's just basically letting you know this is the sexual nature of where this is headed will make some of these other sexual ideologies pale in comparison. That's basically what that's about. And it's also inspiring, if you will, in investments in any space, especially in the U.S. economy, has somewhat of a contagious approach. So me investing in me is trying to inspire women to actually take notice, understand what's about to happen here. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's a lot of that tied up in those verses. But great. If I'm correct, the center track on the album. You know what I mean? And I like how the beat swings, but it doesn't have a hard kick and snare. You know what I mean? So, dual invest. The Casual. That's an interlude. Just a beat that I wanted to put on the album because it was original. It was one of the ones that I had made in the original set of beats. But I hate to call them meditation sessions, but there are times where I'll just be sitting and vibing the beat. Sometimes I'll be on the basketball court. Sometimes, y'all gotta pardon me if you see me scratch. These mosquitoes are out here today. You know, I'll be listening to beats on the basketball court. Sometimes I'll be at a coffee shop. I'll just be sitting there working on graphics, and I'll just be playing the beats and just feeling. And sometimes something will spark a chorus, and I'll immediately write it. Sometimes verses or lines will come, blah, blah, blah. So I'll just be trying to get in that posture, you know what I mean, and wait for a spark. So I'll just be doing it. It could be at random times. But I've listened to this beat several times, and when it got closer to the time where I was actually writing to you know, put a project together, the beat came up again, but I just couldn't hear me spitting on it. You know what I mean? And I kept trying to almost make myself develop something to put together for it. I was in Houston, and I think it was right before I was on my way up to DFW. So Baton Rouge, maybe Baton Rouge, Houston, Austin, and then on up to Dallas or something like that, whatever the route was. I know I was in Houston, and I went to go visit a buddy of mine, and we sat and talked, and I was playing beats for him. We just talking about, this is what we do. We talk about old music, new music, blah, 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 what we're into. We'll reminisce on some stuff. We have a good time. We'll sit for hours, you know what I mean, because we don't see each other that often. And when I played the beat for him, I was talking to him about the album. When I played the beat for him, he was like, I kind of hear that as like an interlude. And I was like, thank you. Because I was almost feeling bad, because I know I mean, when you listen to it, it's got a nice little, so it's got a nice groove to it. It's got a nice groove to it, but I just couldn't get there. You know what I mean? So when he said that, it was confirmation. Okay. You know, I'm not just going to judge on his ear, but that means our ears are aligned. We heard the same thing. So it put me at ease. Okay, I'm fine not, you know, recording over this. And so that's who, you know, that's ultimately what I decided on. I want to put it on the album, so I'll just make it as an interlude. And that's like I said, that's the beauty of being a producer. You know, when you make your own beats, you decide what's gonna be what. You know what I mean? So the leading, featuring La Dialogue, and props to La Dialogue for coming through for me. When I was putting this project together, I really felt like the Spirit of the Lord said, because I always look for who can I get featured on it, so it's not just me for the whole record. You know what I mean? And typically Killer would be the first one I think about because I know he's going to put together, you know, he could put the verse together quick, we vibe really well together and so forth. And so typically I'm gonna hit him for a feature. But I feel like the Spirit of the Lord said, not on this album. You know what I mean? And you know, it kind of bothered at me. That's my, but you know, there's always a reason the Lord has things going a certain way. And whether it's for diversity purposes or what have you, I kind of like the flow. I'll give you an example. I just was listening. It's crazy that I'm doing this track for track edition today, because earlier today I listened to the one for 45 and the one for the recording videos I did for the David album. So I was just kind of, you know, vibing, listening to my track for tracks, walking around the stores while I was shopping. And I listened to the one for the art album. And so in listening to that, I heard the part where I was talking about how Fresh Production, which is the last song on the art album, which is featuring Lyric Kill, and we do an awesome job going back and forth with that. I'm not gonna say he came off better than me, but he did his thing on that. You know what I mean? I couldn't have done that song. It wouldn't have sounded as good without him on it. You know what I mean? And he came through exactly how I needed him to finish. I do my first 8, he comes in with 8, comes in with the second verse, and then I finish off. So it gelled perfectly. What I was gonna say though is, it wasn't originally gonna be the last song on the album. Who I Am was supposed to be the last song on the album, and you can hear it when I open it up. I said, oh, we gotta go out with a bang, baby. It was supposed to be the last song on the album. But the way that Fresh Production was, I couldn't figure out where else to put it. I'm serious, it took prayer to go, Lord, is this right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know so I guess it's gonna be the last song, and it was, you know what I mean? I felt good being able to break. I'm very strong about what I wanna do, and so when there's a change in it, you know it's a reason for it, you know what I mean? I'm going against the grain of what I really, really, really intended to do. So when I felt like the Spirit of the Lord said, you know, not Killer on this album, I was like, okay, then who I'm going to use to feature or what have you. And so when I was doing this, when I was putting this song together, the leading, I had another guy that I had met through a Instagram. We do this thing on Clubhouse where it's like somewhat of an open mic. It's like people, we send in tracks and we play them and review them and so forth. It's really cool. It's been a blessing to me. It's people who got to hear certain parts of my album that probably would have never come across it, have really appreciated and given me props on it and so forth, and other projects as well. It's a way to kind of network and meet other artists and get features and so forth. So there was a guy I met out in Cali who's actually from Cali, and I sent him the beat. And the idea was I was going to get him on there if he could get his verse recorded, you know what I mean? And it just wasn't quite gelling, just timing wise and his access to studio and so forth, which it was all good. But I knew I wanted a feature in there, and I was like, well, let me call the dialogue. I think he could come off really well with it. He came through with it, you know what I mean? Helped me to set up my last verse. It's interesting because if I'm correct, the chorus was probably where I went at it first. That kind of inspired the rest of the when it's all done, and that came from the vibe of the dun 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 dun. And so I came up with, when it's all done, know that I led some. When it's all done, know that I fed some. The idea was, in all that I'm doing, you know what I mean? My leadership is different. I don't expect people to follow. I'm that person. I don't expect for people to listen to my albums. I don't expect for people to give a shit about what I'm doing is very deliberate. And so you gotta really, really be into, enjoy, get something from in order to rock with me. You know, you can be a person who prepares the best meals, but people still gotta want to eat. And some people who eat might only eat just a little bit of everything. Some might just only eat a little bit of something. And so the idea was, in my style of leadership, when it's all done, just know that I led some, and when it's all done, just know that I fed some. You know what I mean? And that's whether or not they ate or with it. I provided it. I set up things for, you know, in leadership capability to teach and educate and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And so this is kind of set, my two verses, at least the second verse is set around military. You know what I mean? It gets into the me being a single individual, how I operate. Just bounce right, first verse, just bounce right in unannounced. You know what I mean? Witness a nigga immortalized at 45. You know what I mean? It's just talking about the divine nature that I'm coming into in a very real, deliberate, and authoritative way. And just kind of goes on from there. And then, you know, you get to my last verse, you hear me talk about military grade, center grenade, blah, blah, blah. That's basically kind of coming at America's government and military services and so forth, and me doing the same thing but in a different way. You know what I mean? Swarm of a one-man army, boots laced and planted. You know what I mean? Feeding the fruit. And then obviously the sexual element in there and so forth. And the last line is saying, that's the purpose of porn. I mean, born leadership. Oops, you know what I mean? So I appreciate the dialogue for coming in and assisting, because it's the only feature on the album. You know what I mean? Short project, and I typically don't have like a gang load of features on my projects, at least not right now. You know what I mean? And so I appreciate him coming through, and I think it definitely added, you know, some dimensionality besides just my wittiness and verse and so forth. He brought some of his into it and so forth. So definitely shout out the dialogue for that. And then again, same thing with Killer. It wasn't a personal beef type of deal. I just really felt led that you know what I mean? Okay, I'm gonna go with the Lord says, because Killer's always my first choice. You know what I mean? For features, you know what I mean? One, because he's dope. Two, because he's dope quickly. You know what I mean? Like, Killer put some shit together quick, and we vibe. We can gel well. You know what I mean? So yeah, I appreciate him allowing me the recording space and opening his home to me, and even critiquing. Like, he'll send stuff back to me and say, you know, what about this, blah blah blah. So yep, the leading. The shuffle. The original name of that beat was Tussle with Tasha. I don't know how I came up with that. Tussle with Tasha. Again, in the original set of beats. You know what I mean? I was in a pocket. It was a particular like day or two. I was in a pocket, man, just banging beats out. So I knew that was going to be on there. It's crazy because I didn't even know conceptually what I was going to go for at first. But that's why I said I'm glad the album didn't come out before 45. My albums build Still the sexual element in there, but it's getting deeper. It ain't one dimensional. You see what I'm saying? This thing is building. So I can just give you one word for the shuffle: prostitution. It's about being a male prostitute and not giving a fuck other than the fucking. That's what it's about. It's the mystery of, okay, if Hosea was told to marry a prostitute. So see, the church would have problems with that, though it's in their Bible. And it was to the glory of God. God was developing me, and it was like, oh. You see what I'm saying? I'm seeking the Spirit of the Lord. I don't need to be hankered down to, limited to one. So that's what it's about. And but I use it as a card game. So I took different card games, for the lack of a better means. Some of the posture, something I must discuss as a card game, neither crack or methamphetamines, near the effect, and just kind of goes on from there. And I started just talking about, you know what I mean, dealing out my body, but talking about these different things. What's one of the lines I say in there? The way my dad used to deal baccarat plot, and so some of these I had to research. Baccarat is about getting closer to 9, and you know what I mean. Certain things are added, taken away, blah blah blah, to get as close to 9. So that's what I say. Baccarat plot. Make it hot with the rock. The way the bitch is getting 8 is closer to 9. You see what I'm saying? Sync their relationships to anchor the mind. Lavender. Tell that bitch. Blah blah blah. I had to pull a card. Knowing the whole had it. I got institution too. See, they got constitution. I got constitution. I got pro or prostitution. I got institution too, and I'm a pro at it. You know? That's probably the most comedic song on the album. You know what I mean? I got institution too, and I'm a pro at it. Sprague Street swag. Sprague Street is a street in Shreveport. It's kind of like that strip where a lot of that did go down, you know what I mean? So I just kind of played off that, did a little research here and there, remembered a bunch of things, had to do a little bit more research on it, tried to incorporate that with the different card games. The last line talks about Uno. I think that's the last word in the song too. Professor and Uno, the oldest profession and professor and profession in Uno. So, you know, they say prostitution is the oldest profession, so that's what I was doing there. The teacher and the operator therein. So I did that. And so I just wanted to do something creative with the approach. You know what I mean? Right, so this is what I'm talking about, but I'm going to do it in the form of cards. You know what I mean? Cut my suit, baby. Spade in the fruit. You know what I mean? Oh man. And fuck the high heels. I'm healer of the highest. Dealer with a size. Wheeler of a size for. Dealer with a bias. Wheeler of a size. That's Isaiah. Isaiah 4:1. Let me tell you what Isaiah 4:1 says. Isaiah 4:1 says, and in that day 7 women will cling to one man, saying, we will eat our own food and buy our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. I've been trying to teach that to women, where this thing is headed for a lot of the haughtiness and their refusal to seek the Spirit of God about what he's intending to do kingdom-wise. But that's where it's headed. Now, would that be for everybody? I don't know. It lets you know where it is. And then I say, so Isaiah 4:1, 32, 34, chapter 32 and chapter 34 is other serious judgments. I'm sure in other places in the Bible too, but those 3 places stood out. Isaiah 4, chapter 4, verse 1, Isaiah chapter 32, and it's some verses in there, and then Isaiah chapter 34, some verses in there. So I just, so fuck the high heels. I'm healer of the highest, dealer with a bias, wheeler of a size 4:1, 32, 34, war gun blasting. So yeah, that's what it's about. Being a male prostitute. And that's not for anybody else but me. Not saying there won't be others. I'm saying I can't make that case for anybody else. Mine is very deliberate, very detailed, very direct, led by the Spirit of God. Which is why I keep telling people to go ask God, because I don't expect for my own testimony to be what seals the deal in your mind. You know what I mean? So, the shuffle. All right, last one. The truth and tragedy. Remember I was talking earlier about which beats I played the most. It was a couple of them, but this is probably the one I played the most. Anticipating doing something with it because it has such a soulful sample. Well, it's got a hard kick, hard snare. It by itself, just the sample itself, has a soul expression in it that's telling its own story. And I talk about it, I have beats like that. I'm not saying others don't, but it's just how I feel. Whether other people feel or not, it's like the sample itself is telling its own story. It has its own way of expressing itself. You know what I mean? And I knew I wanted to capture that. You know what I mean? I knew I wanted to do something with it. And I gotta be honest, it's probably the beat on the album that made me the most nervous. That's a fact. When I say the most nervous, it's because I don't want to mess this up. It's too awesome. It's too soulful. I don't want to fuck this song up. You know what I mean? And I think I did it justice. The first verse, this is weird. The first verse was started sitting at my mom on the toilet at my mom's apartment. Just telling you. The first words to the first verse started coming to me. You know what I mean? Priestly. How I talk with priestly led. Something priestly named picture. Because I had questions about how I wrote that out. It makes sense to me now, but I know what I heard, like in the spirit. Well, there's the priestly name picture, so you could be familiar when it hits you. The train of tragedy, locomotive in me. That first 2 to 4 bars, it was like, whoa. And it had to do, let me tell you what the first verse is about. The first verse, which is what I call the truth and tragedy. The first verse is about an actual thing that I witnessed. I was in, and I've talked about this on other content videos. I was in Grand Prairie on my way to Arlington, coming down Pioneer Parkway. I passed the building the other day, and there was a Hispanic guy. That's why I said Juan. I witnessed Juan crossing the street. He was a Hispanic guy, completely red in his face. You could tell he was drunk. He was stumbling like from the grass to the sidewalk. And I thought he was going to stop. I had just passed him, because I seen him. I had just passed him, and he kept going. And the pickup truck behind me, plowed right into him. But what else is he gonna do? You don't expect for somebody to step out into traffic, but he sure enough did, and got mollywopped. So that's what I wrote about. And what I was expressing was how the nature of the track is how soon and unexpectedly tragedy can happen. That's why truth is the most important thing. You see what I'm saying? Even the truth about which direction you should go in a certain whatever. You don't know what's lurking behind. You see what I'm saying? Or there be a stray bullet, or it be something very intentional. So the Spirit of God is trying to lead you. And it's crazy because I remember that day having that thought after that. Like, it's tragedy time. I know God has been talking to me about tragedy easily for the last 6 years. And so that's how I started the song off. You know what I mean? And I got that verse together, and then you hear the chorus. I can't remember at what point I wrote the chorus. I might have wrote it in the studio when I was recording it. The second verse is also a traffic tragedy that happened sometime this year, maybe a couple of months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, there was a couple in the Baton Rouge area on their way up to Zachary, which is a suburb of Baton Rouge. I'm saying suburb, but you know what I mean. A town just north of Baton Rouge. And apparently this lady was, the black lady, she was on her way somewhere up Plank Road. Something happened, she ended up having a car accident, dying. The authorities alerted her husband, and on the way, her fiance, and on the way there, he had a car accident on the same street, and he ended up dying. So I wrote that as the second verse, and I'm trying to get across, what did they have going on? What were they avoiding? What was it that? You know, was it God's way of just calling them home and using tragedy to do it? Because God doesn't know tragedy. You know what I mean? In the same way we do. He's not shocked by it. You know what I mean? So that's what it was doing. It's taking two similar, not similar incidents, but they both had to do with tragedy and vehicles. You know what I mean? Dying. I don't know if the Hispanic guy died. Yeah. You know what I mean? Surviving that. I mean, he got mollywopped. And I only saw it through my rearview mirror. You know what I mean? Because I saw him stumbling to the street. I was like, I pray to God that he stops. What is he? You could tell he was drunk, though. You know what I mean? And bah! So in the chorus, that's what I tell you. You know what I mean? Death may seem like miles away. You know what I mean? In the choice of hold on or let go, something might. I'm basically talking about how a lot of times the only choice you can really make is to find truth and operate in truth. Because you don't know, like that's what I was saying, the truth about a very, very would seem minute detail. Don't order French fries today from this restaurant. Don't eat the guacamole on your, whatever, you don't know. You need to listen to the Spirit of God. By the way, remember what I said about not having Killer on the album? You know, whether it be something tragic, something with you see, you don't know. You just listen to what the Spirit of God tells you for whatever reason. Maybe where I was going to put Killer, something significant I needed to say in that spot wouldn't have gotten said because he'd have put his verse there. You get what I'm saying? It's just, you don't know. So the safest way is to listen to the Spirit of truth, get familiar with his to his voice, and move in what he tells you to do. You know what I mean? And so again, I was proud of how that song came out. I'm gonna eventually put out the instrumentals. I should have been did it, but just so that people can vibe to it too, I always release the instrumentals. But I knew, you know, I gotta put this song on the album. It's gotta, you know, I gotta do it justice, and I think I did. And that closes out the album. All in all, I'm very proud of the project, especially being one of my shorter ones. I haven't done this shorter project since my first and second, which was The Feverish and The Prophet and the Prophecy. Those two both had 7 songs, even though The Feverish had some interludes and stuff in it, but 7 actual songs on them. So, and I like what I can do with that. I plan on doing more projects like that. That way I can get kind of more of them out there. I'm not doing that. The Checkmate album is 23 songs long. You see what I'm saying? And I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do it, because I want it to be one album, even if it's broken up into, 2 or 3. I still want it to be you know what I mean? That might be the one I just let be long, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I get it. At this point, it's about, it has always been what I enjoy and how I want to do things and so forth. And I don't have a project quite like that. It is the project that is the most anticipated. You know what I mean? It's the project that preceded all the other ones. The Feverish album got put out because these mosquitoes tore me up, baby. I just got to tell you that. They had they field. the Feverish album came about because I was in the studio recording, and it just wasn't going like I wanted it to go. So I had to pull back a little bit and went and messed with some beats and, you know, hit a sample, pitch down, and turned that beat, turned into something, and then turned into an album. Eventually became an album. So, and I haven't gone back to the Checkmate album. So it's still kind of that dangling carrot, you know what I mean, that I intend to get to. I was listening to the beats the other day. And so it's still something that, you know, sometimes things get old to you. And you outgrow where you were at, even if you didn't. I get it, you know what I mean? It's tragic sometimes, but I get it. But I don't feel that with this. It's almost more attractive to me now because I'm becoming a better artist and more seasoned, and there's things I can do that I probably wouldn't have did at the time of trying to put it together. So, but this album is definitely a winner. I'm very proud of it as I've listened to it. The sound quality, there's some things I did with I had some technical difficulties in it too, but you know, when I was working on it, it gave me a couple of problems, not just on the technical side, but on the creative side when I was in the studio, because I was working, even though I was house and dog sitting, I was picking up a couple of shifts, and so trying to get back there and then rest from the work and then get into recording mode and so on and so forth, and then trying to make sure my voice inflections are right. And so I was glad that not only did I get it done, but it sounds like I want it to sound, you know what I mean? So I'm very proud of that. And hopefully, you know, people continue to listen to it. But it's one for the books. I'm as an artist on the producer and MC side, I can put my seal of approval on it and say I did well on this. And I've got 3 shows coming up as it stands, one in Lafayette, one in Baton Rouge, and one in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'm trying to add at least 2 of the songs, The Holding Door and The Assembly, to the show set. So we're working on that. I'm about 90% accurate on the assembly, spitting it, but I still got to work on the holding door, probably about 50% there. So still got some work to do there, just for memorization, and then see if I can work it into the show. Because I've got a show set that I'm pretty solid on, you know what I mean? But incorporating some new joints, working on that. So that's what it is. The Inconspicuous and Intentional Acts of the Truth Man. Again, this is Acts 1. So if you hear me call it Acts 1, it's because it's the first installment. There should be a second, and I can't tell you when, but it's in the queue. So the beats, for the most part, have already been done for it. It's about organizing them, writing to it, getting into a rhythm, and letting it start to, you know what I mean, come together. And then, you know, and we'll make a run with it. I want to thank everybody again, Lyrikill, La Dialogue, Kikala Diallo, because that's one of my advisors. Mr. J, and then some of the other ones that I don't mention often, J Double, because, you know, we've chatted up about beats and other things. And sometimes just those conversations alone mean a lot to me. You know what I mean? And then, you know, everyone else, you know, who I didn't mention by name, they know who they are, who we can kind of chop it up and talk music and do different things from there. Glad to put the project together, glad to put it out. Right now it's only up on Bandcamp, and you can get access to it through, and let me just give you the Bandcamp website, www.NastyOnTheBeats.bandcamp.com. But if you go to my website, www.NastyOnTheBeats.com, you know, it'll take, you know, I've got links up there that'll take you to my Bandcamp, and my whole catalog is right there. So it's up there with that, and I'll be seeing you at the next edition of Track for Track. Holla.